Hello, fellow Auraxians. Today, I want to spend another minute on combined arms. Really, the overall balance of Planetside. Finding the right balance in this game is extremely difficult. Each little change you make has rippling butterfly effects. When you nerf one item that's overperforming in some area, it turns out it was a good counter to a different platform or weapon. So even though that other platform or weapon wasn't adjusted, all of a sudden it becomes more powerful because one of its threats was removed. And when I dive into balance discussions, someone usually brings one of these items up. Hey, if you adjust that, this vehicle or this weapon will be way out of whack, you can't do that. And they're usually accurate with those comments, and it's not that I haven't thought about those, but if I covered every little butterfly effect from each part of the discussion, every video would be 2 hours long. So my intention with this video series is to create a compendium of how all those items fit together. In that manner, we have a baseline, so whenever a butterfly effect comes up in someone's mind, they can refer to this as a resource for how that item will be addressed. Before we dive into the overall balance, please take a minute and make sure you've watched my series on the flow of battle. We can sit there and pull levers on maxes and vehicles and aircraft and infantry all day long, but if the battle flow continues to suck, it doesn't matter how perfectly balanced you make the game. So that's a very key aspect that we got to nail down in this discussion. Now, at a very high level, my concept for balance is that vehicles and aircraft are supposed to dominate the fields, and infantry are supposed to dominate the bases. Now, whenever I bring that up, the first thing I get is, hey, you are decombining our arms. This is a combined arms game. We don't want to separate everything. And that's not my goal at all, but the interactions need to be fun and engaging. There need to be aspects of Planetside where a tank is the best tool for the job, or an aircraft is a great tool to get that job done, or the heavy assault is the right tool. We're in a situation right now where a heavy assault is kind of a tool for everything. Pulling out an annihilator, it can ruin aircraft battles and tank battles for 200 to 300 meters around. And then it can immediately switch over to its high mag size LMG and just dominate the infantry fights. Maxes have very similar problems, being really good everywhere. But these high-power infantry units are necessary to combat the high-powered ESFs. They can roll around with rocket pods that are extremely deadly to tanks and infantry, and they still have their nose guns so they can compete against aircraft. The idea here is not to completely separate them, but to create fun, interesting interactions where every platform fits together like a jigsaw puzzle and counters each other in sort of a rock, paper, scissors format, rather than doing what we have now, where every platform is just a big sledgehammer and you just see who can smash the other one first. And there's one more thing to keep in mind as we discuss the balance of all the various weapons and platforms in Planetside 2. Originally, there was supposed to be a deep, immersive resource system for pulling consumables, maxes, and vehicles in Planetside. And because of that, those platforms were originally intentionally more powerful. The idea being that they were scarce and they wouldn't always be around. So when they were, they could get a lot of work done. That's not how the game played out. Myself, I stopped subscribing a while back, and I still very rarely feel the squeeze from resources. Vehicles and aircraft have to be treated like they will be on the battlefield full time. And I think that's good. In a combined arms game like this, you don't want people to feel like they have to sit around to play that tank they want or the aircraft they want. It's just that when you balance them, you have to keep the fact that it is not a scarce resource in mind. So there's 4 major categories that you have to balance in Planetside. That is, infantry, vehicles, aircraft, and right now maxes sit in some sort of weird limbo in between a vehicle and infantry. Let's deal with maxes first, as I think they are the most disruptive unit to balance gameplay. I think they are a massive obstacle to new player retention, and they are general, across-the-board fun killers. This is a platform that has a counter to everything and can be easily changed just by going to an infantry terminal. That can be done either behind some shields or at a sunderer. On top of that, the platform is tiny. A tank is a big target to hit, and it can't climb a rock outcropping. Here, myself and a few other maxes held off an entire armor column because of our high-powered AV weaponry and our ability to expose only a tiny portion of our unit by peeking over a rock outcropping. This entirely breaks the vehicle play. The tank drivers are better off getting out of their vehicles and starting to shoot at me with an archer. And that should never be the best option to counter AV weaponry. If they decide to bring aircraft, I'll just walk over to the Sunderer that's 10 paces away, pull my bursters, and dominate them as well. And now let's get into maxes in the anti-infantry environment. Maxes are one of the biggest reasons that I didn't stick with Planetside 1, and I can see that cycle happening again with new players in Planetside 2. Here's what happens. At the time, I was coming from a game, Counter-Strike. Really fun gunplay, but I wanted some bigger scale. And that's going to be the same thing with a lot of new players coming to the game. They're coming from the Call of Duties, they're coming from the battlefields. And what these games don't have is all of a sudden a high-powered, high-health unit interrupting the infantry gameplay. It's something a new player just doesn't know how to counter, they don't have the tools to counter, they don't know how to deal with it. It's extremely disruptive to the classic FPS mechanics that anyone will know. So they'll be getting into the infantry play, and this seemingly invincible unit will come by and wipe them out. It doesn't feel like a fair engagement. Okay, that's fine, so they should just pull their own. So they do, and they're like, sweet, okay, I'm going to be invincible and mow down the other infantry. So they get in one, and a veteran player immediately comes over and wipes them out with C4, a counter they don't have yet. Or a heavy assault comes up and immediately disassembles them with concussion grenades, AV grenades, and their rocket launchers. It leaves them with this feeling of, okay, when other players are in it, it's invincible, but when I'm in it, I die instantaneously. It's too confusing of a mechanic to throw into infantry gameplay. Archers have the exact same problem. They're counters that only the veteran player has, and new players don't even know what it is or why they're taking so much damage all of a sudden. It's solving one problem by creating another. And don't get me started on everyone throwing tank mines down in the middle of a base so that enemy infiltrators can just EMP me. Tank mines should be getting thrown down to counter things in the field, not littering infantry fights for EMP fodder. Maxes have been such a massive balance problem, in trying to fix them, they've created 17 more issues. It's more of that butterfly effect. For better or worse, what is expected of an FPS has already been set. And I realize they're trying to break the mold with maxes and set themselves apart. Maxes in their current state just do not achieve it. They are a source of ruining fun, they are a source of breaking balance. And then the only thing that they did well for the game, that is max crashes and breaching heavily entrenched points, was removed when sprint was taken away. Now it had to go because it was usually used as an escape mechanic. It made maxes too survivable. But the side effect was removing the one thing they really brought to the game. So a lot of people will say, well, just get rid of them. Get maxes out of here if they're ruining all that stuff. Well, no, you can't do that. People have spent a lot of money on maxes, on the cosmetics, on the weapons. They must stay in the game. So here's my fix. Take the existing max and rename it to a mech. Change it from being pulled at an infantry terminal to being pulled at a vehicle terminal. Increase its size by 4 times. Maxes have gone too far down this road of being good at everything. It's time to recommit them to being part of the vehicle play and not intruding into the infantry play. Now that they're relegated to being part of the field fight, their bursters make sense, their long-range AV makes sense, their short-range AV makes sense. Now let's look over the plethora of AI weapons real quick. And I know the Terran weapon's the best, so I'm going to discuss it regarding TR. But NC and VS both have their own equivalent variants that'll get adjusted just like these. The Onslaughts remain as the mech's only strictly AI weaponry. The Mutilators and the Cyclers get readjusted into AV machine gun variants, and the Mercy gets readjusted into a Walker-esque type of weapon to counter aircraft. I just want to point out the drastic changes to items have been done before in the game. I paid real money for the Striker, and then it was nerfed into the ground and entirely changed. And it spent a long time being a not very effective weapon until they retuned it. It was a tough change for people that own the weapon to swallow, but it was an extremely important change for the overall health of the game. Converting existing max weaponry into the mech weaponry will be a similar change. Difficult for people to accept at first, but overall creating a much healthier game. When maxes are adjusted and released as mechs, they need to be significantly less capable as everything else on the battlefield. We do not want another round of the BFR happening. They need to start extremely underpowered, and they can slowly be tuned to be a functional part of the vehicle and aircraft meta. One of the big advantages of increasing its size is it can't then go through doorways and get into these infantry battles. So, now that maxes have been changed to mechs, we've dealt with all the weaponry maxes have that ruin them as part of the infantry game. Now we can bring maxes back and make them a functional part of the infantry meta. And the goal there is that they are not effective killing machines, they are defensive tanky units. To start, maxes will receive some shield options. This was mocked up by someone on the subreddit. I do want to point out that this idea of maxes having a forward shield was suggested back in beta, so don't think that this is an idea stolen from Overwatch. Players wanted this put in Planetside before Overwatch even existed. But I do think Reinhardt is a terrific proof of concept. Even though Reinhardt exists as primarily a melee character in a game of mostly ranged heroes, he is still extremely fun to play. Maxes will lose all of their medium to long ranged engagement capability, training them in for a variety of shields, melee weapons, and a few extremely short range projectile weapons. The kinetic shield will be extremely resistant to small arms fire, and more susceptible to rockets and tank shells. The other option will be more like flak armor and be flipped the other way around. The latter could allow infantry to push through a field, the former would be used in bases a lot. And then the final option will be a dome type shield, much like the medic shield bubble, allowing 360 degree coverage, but much less health on the shield and a very tight radius on it. Max's weapons would either be melee or no more than 5 meters in range. The first round of these weapons has already been designed. Pictured are a sword for VS, a hammer for NC, and brass knuckles for TR. The first of the close-range weapons has already been created, and that is the Flamethrower. Shields will always take up one arm slot. You could use a melee weapon with a shield, or you could use one Flamethrower with it. You would lose the max shield ability if you went with 2 melee or 2 Flamethrower weapons. And with every topic that needs adjustment in Planetside, Vindicore has already nailed it. I'll provide a link to his max overhaul suggestions, but the new maxes should closely follow his suggestions and guidance. And obviously the biggest thing that needs to come back with maxes is sprint. Once you take away their range, then you can give them some mobility back. They should be charging into these entrenched, heavily defended rooms, wielding massive chainsaws, hammers, and flamethrowers, and really creating a dynamic element to infantry battles. But at the same time, while they're going to catch 1, maybe 2 guys on their initial charge, they should be helpless beyond that. From there on, after they've disrupted the enemy, it's time for infantry to come in with their medium to long range LMGs and assault rifles and take out the enemy. Maxes become more of a defensive distraction than a murder machine. Tank mines should no longer have a place in the infantry battles. Archers will still have their place, doing significantly more damage to maxes than small arms fire, but maxes will be able to counter them if they bring shields along, and their shield use helps balance them because they can only bring one weapon if they have a shield equipped. So guys, that's going to do it for the first part of the series. The takeaway is that the existing max is impossible to balance. So capable in the infantry combat and so capable in the vehicle and air combat, it basically needs to be split in 2. And in doing so, without having to create new art assets, we'll still create some new emergent gameplay from the defensive infantry unit to the new offensive vehicle unit. In the rest of this segment, we'll be diving into how infantry interact with vehicles, including mechs and aircraft, and vice versa, how we can make all of these interactions fun and engaging rather than a bunch of sledgehammers trying to mash each other up. As always, please continue this discussion down in the comment section, add your thoughts and ideas. Thank you for your continued support, and I will see you Planetside.